Hi, I'm Rob Simulcare with Persona, and I'm joined by best-selling author Emily Liebert, whose new book, Perfectly Famous, hits the bookstores on June 2nd. If you want to be a part of connecting with Emily before her book release, you can find her on the Persona Interviews app. Find it at personatalks.com. Send her a question. She will answer your question, tell you all about what it's like to be a famous author, and get you excited to read this book. Emily?
Write to me. I can't wait to answer all your burning questions.
Awesome. Emily Liebert is a best-selling author on the USA Today bestsellers list. She has been cranking out novels since 2013. In June, she's going to publish her 6th novel called Perfectly Famous, coming out on June 2nd. She's a high school mate of mine, a Westport, Connecticut friend of mine, and I'm really pleased to be joined by her here at her beautiful home. How are you?
I'm great. I'm pleased to be here with you. Thanks for coming.
So you have been a machine. You have churned out 6 novels now since your debut in 2013. First of all, how do you do that? So many people dream of writing one book. You have managed to do 6 books. What is the process that allows you to do that?
So I think of it as my job, as anyone else thinks of their job. I go to my job every day. I know it sounds harder to motivate on because people actually have to be at their job. They may have a boss who's looking over their shoulder and they have to be there during certain hours. I have to self-motivate, but I've never had a problem with that. So when I am writing, I set aside the hours of 8:15 when my kids get on the bus to around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and during that time all of my writing gets done and ideally a workout gets done.
Yes.
And then after that, in the later afternoon, I will return emails that need more attention, have set up conference calls. I have a lot of calls with California, so it works out well that I sort of do that in the later part of the day since they're 3 hours earlier. But I go to my job every day and I write my book like it's a job.
How has that changed? I mean, I'm sure you've learned a lot about just the process of writing. What have you learned? How has it changed since you first started?
I think I learned more what word count I want to hit every day, what word count I want to hit every week, how long that will actually take to get the first draft done. I've also learned, which was a very quick learning curve, that I can't write when my children are around, which has been definitely a challenge during the time of quarantine.
I was going to ask about that.
But I find ways, you have to.
Yeah, it's got to be.
It's like anyone else doing their job during quarantine. Everyone's at home and, you do the best you can.
Right. The work was always home for you, or near
right,
home,
it's
and
just
everything
now.
Invaded your office.
That's
exactly.
right.
It's
exactly.
not like you're home from the office.
I do actually have an office in Westport that I used to go to.
Yeah.
But we ended up giving it up because who knows when I'll be able to go back there, and we were just paying rent on an office for no reason.
Sense. So the theme of this book, Perfectly Famous, is maybe not too much of a stretch for you as a writer.
Right.
It's the protagonist is a female author who lives in a Tony, Connecticut town and deals with her fame as there is the success that she's achieved as an author. So a little autobiographical here, perhaps. Where did this come from?
I am definitely not as famous of an author as Ward is in the book,
right.
so I don't have a big problem dealing with my fame around town.
I don't know.
I don't know about that, what fame that is. But of course, there were aspects of the career and the motivation that I understood from having been in her place and still being in her place. I don't struggle with attention in the way that she does. I don't really have a problem with that.
Right.
Maybe I would if I was as famous as she was and I got that much attention. But certainly I pulled from my own life. And the other character is a journalist. And during parts of my career, I would have called myself a journalist. I used to work in TV. I used to write for ABC News. I used to write for newspapers and magazines, and I still write for some magazines sometimes.
We went to the same high school.
We did.
I'm a little older than you.
The best high school in the world.
Absolutely. We reconnected here in Westport. And I wonder, when you were back at Horace Mann, is this where you saw yourself? Was this your goal, or did you find this later as you went through different jobs in journalism?
I always knew I wanted to be in the journalism space in some way. Little known fact, which you will appreciate, I thought in the beginning of my career that I wanted to be a radio sportscaster.
Not a bad gig.
I talked to Susan Waldman at great length at the time. I'm sure you know who she is.
The Yankees color commentator, yeah.
Yes. And she said, you need to know a lot about sports.
It does help.
As it happened, I knew a ton about baseball, but I didn't really know a lot about other sports, and I wasn't that interested in getting to know everything about every sport.
Mm-hmm.
So that fell by the wayside pretty quickly. But I did think for a good while that I wanted to be on air. I just wasn't prepared to do what it took to get there, which was go work in, Idaho and go work in all of these small markets for years, not knowing whether you'll ever get to a big enough market where you actually want to live and have a family in
Absolutely.
that place.
That's
so.
generally the process. I think you would be very good.
Thank you.
If you would try that.
I do like being in front of the camera.
How do you describe the genre of your writing? There's, women's fiction. There's the tag chick lit that you hear a lot, which I want to ask you about. But what is your genre?
So there are so many authors who are offended or feel slighted by terms like chick lit or women's fiction because there's no men's fiction.
Exactly.
Just everything that's not women's fiction is just fiction.
Yes.
Honestly, it doesn't bother me. I always say, and this is somewhat of a joke and somewhat not, you can call my book whatever you want, just buy it.
God, that is a marketing mentality.
So
Absolutely.
I would say that my first 4 novels were solidly women's fiction, 100% beach reads. I don't know that I'd call them chick lit because there is a difference between chick lit, which is more flighty, not a lot of depth. I would call maybe like Sophie Kinsella's books, the Shopaholic series.
Okay.
Like that's more chick lit.
Okay.
Whereas women's fiction, upmarket women's fiction deals with more relationship issues between men and women, between friends, more serious content, but still beach reads.
Mm-hmm.
The last novel that I wrote, Pretty Revenge, and this novel, Perfectly Famous, are being categorized as psychological suspense. Now, I think for my part that the publishing world tries to pigeonhole authors into very specific categories.
Because it helps from a marketing point of view.
Of course, and you have to be in this section of the bookstore, and it has to say what, categories, how they categorize you on Amazon and things like that. But I think that my books still straddle the line between women's fiction and psychological suspense. There's the much faster paced plot. There are the twists and turns, if I can speak. But when those things are not happening and they're in the background, the conversations and the relationships feel more like women's fiction. For example, Maggie and Bree's friendship in this book feels completely like women's fiction to me.
Yeah. Women's fiction, but no men's fiction. Chick lit, but no
I do not think a lot of dude lit. I do not think a lot of men are reading my books. I have to be completely honest.
Do you think that the differences between the genders are so great that men can't relate to female writers and female characters, and perhaps vice versa? Like, why is there this divide in literature?
So I think a lot of women read the types of books that I would consider more men's fiction, like Clive Cussler and John Grisham. I mean, those are such huge authors that, of course, everyone reads them.
It can't just be men, yeah.
Right, but I do think there is. I mean, I'm not going to stereotype every man on the face of the earth, but I think in large part, men's interests are not talking about feelings and relationships. And
Really?
I think as I move more into psychological suspense, my books appeal more to certain men. But the beachy kind of women's fiction reads, I don't think too many men are interested in that.
Perfectly Famous, so
Thank you.
I can tell you as a guy, it's eminently readable.
This is probably the least women's fiction-ish book that I've written, so I could see where this would appeal to more men.
Yeah, absolutely.
But may have not been a book that you would have picked up on your own.
Perhaps not.
Had you not.
I don't wander into that section
Right, exactly.
often, so that's part of the issue.
Exactly.
You have an interesting approach to marketing your books. It's something I actually never seen before. You pair up with consumer goods companies.
Yes.
In this case, this book is a women's undergarments company called Wacol.
Yes.
Have to admit, I'm not that familiar with the brand.
You
or the
pronounced it
products,
right.
but I did
amazing.
work on the pronunciation. How did that method of marketing come about?
So when I wrote my first novel, You Knew Me When, I had written one book prior to that, which was narrative nonfiction called Facebook Fairy Tales. And it was 25 amazing stories that came from Facebook connections, and it got a ton of publicity.
Yes.
Because it was about Facebook when Facebook was exploding. I had gotten to interview Mark Zuckerberg, which was a big coup back then. And I knew and had also been warned that when you write a novel, you do not get the same amount of publicity that you get from nonfiction. Certainly not something that's based around something that's being so hyped at the moment.
Makes sense.
So I thought for a long time about what I could do that would separate me from the pack. And somewhere in that thinking, I came up with the idea that wouldn't it be great to have nail polish named after the three main characters in that case. And at the time, since I was new author, I approached every company under the sun, and I ended up partnering with actually a great and still very successful nail polish brand called Zoya, and they made the You Knew Me When collection, which was 3 polishes named after the 3 characters. And it got me into all sorts of magazines, on websites, on TV that wouldn't have just written up my book, but loved this cute kind of idea of the nail polishes.
No one had ever done that.
No one had ever done it, and no one has still done it. People still give away swag with their books, like they'll give like a candle or a keychain or something like that, or a pencil, but no one has actually, amazingly, no one's copied it because it's been so successful. No one has partnered with the brand. There are television shows. The show Girls that was on HBO did a nail polish collection. I don't think they copied me, but it was after
television
I did
shows,
it.
Movies have done it forever.
Exactly.
I mean, the partnerships with McDonald's and the Happy Meal or whatever, it's time tested.
So, and after that, I just continued, and I did my next book. I did a partnership with Canyon Ranch. I've done with It Cosmetics, Gerard Cosmetics, and with Perfectly Famous. And then I returned to nail polish with KB Shimmer for Pretty Revenge, and we did 2 polishes, which are gorgeous. And then for this book, I was actually approached by Wacol, and they came to me and they said, "We think you're an influencer," and I was like, "Me? I don't even have that many followers. Like, what are you talking? I'm an influencer." And they were like, "No, you are."
I think you are.
And I was like, okay.
6 novels, you're an influencer. Yeah.
I'm sure, fine, I'm an influencer.
Take it.
And so they were great. They really wanted to partner in some way. And I said, my partnerships always have to be authentic. I did nail polish for You Knew Me When because the main character was a cosmetics executive and her pet peeve was chipped nails. So there's been an authentic link. And so we came up with a campaign called The Perfect Fit, which is your perfect fit bra and undergarments and your perfect fit book. And what I also loved about Wacol is that they are all about empowering women, and my books are about powerful female characters.
Perfect.
So it was a no-brainer.
That's great. I love it. And how is all of this impacted by the time we're living through now? I mean, I think I'm imagining the idea was that you'd have these big book signings and people would come. It mentioned, I think, in your PR that there'd be fittings for women to try this stuff out, and that's probably not happening so much. So how, both in that context and just more broadly, how do you go about marketing a book release in the middle of a pandemic?
So as far as things like the bra fittings, which is a small piece of it, those can be done virtually and are being done virtually. As far as a book tour, there is not going to be an in-person book tour. I still have a couple events on the calendar for late July and August, and if the world starts to open up and we go through multiple phases, then, maybe those will happen. But I think I realized very early on, which was fortunate, that June 2nd was not going to be a book tour for me. And everyone kept saying, bookstores aren't ready to cancel yet. We're keeping them on the book, and who knows, by June, everything could be fine. And I really didn't see that happening.
So you probably saved some aggravation.
I
and
did
some money,
save a lot of
frankly,
aggravation
even
and money.
promoting something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I pivoted like every other business has had to do.
A lot of
and I
social
set
media.
up a virtual book tour for myself, which I think has, in the end, will probably have 30 quote unquote stops on it, 30 virtual stops,
Smart.
which is pretty massive, because I don't even think I would be doing 30 in person.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, the negative to it is that it's no fun not to be able to go meet everyone and see everyone. But I truly, with everything that's going on in the world and the way businesses are suffering and the financial disarray, I categorize it as a bummer and nothing more than that.
Yeah, I think that's...
And the upside to it is that suddenly anyone in the world can come to my book event.
Anyway.
Whereas before, you had to be local to come to the event, and I was only going 15 places, let's say. So if you didn't live near or in one of those cities, you're out of luck.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, I wish you all the best
Thank
with
you.
the release. Again, the book is Perfectly Famous. It drops on June 2nd at a bookstore near you, Amazon, all the good places, I'm sure.
Yep.
It's fantastic. Check it out. Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.